Okay. Hello, everyone. Tonight's episode is titled The Time Traveler's Ego. And I think it's about time some human being, makes this point about the similarity between the concept of divine intervention and the concept of time travel. The title, The Time Traveler's Ego, this was a phrase I heard myself saying in one of the talks. And then I thought about it and I wondered about what kind of an interesting time in history are we living in that we don't have time travel technology, but we could have a time traveler's ego. Sometimes I think the meaning of the moment is from elsewhere. There has been times in this life where I have felt a dehumanized emptiness. Just a second, guys, I gotta change the music here. What can I say? I guess I'll just start from here by saying that this talk is being recorded in 2022. Human beings, their understanding of time is their memory and also their imagination. Time is like an arrow going forth. The past, sets into motion the future. This is our current understanding as human beings in 2022. That the change of matter in space symbolizes time. I firmly, on some level, know that every moment of reality has hidden angles. Only in ignorance will a human being be satisfied with the shape of reality. The mystery of this world goes beyond shapes. And really, guys, this is one of those episodes where I think I need the help of a time traveler. I mean, see, what I'm trying to say is that we as creatures, what do? We simulate stories of meaning upon reality. The simulation of meaning has three pillars: the past, present, future. On some level, we really look at where meaning can go. It's like, what is the purpose of the meaning of an event in nature? When I look at the past was just trying to get to the future. When I look at the present is waiting for the future. And when I look at the future is waiting for the present, guided by the past. I thought about nature, and when you look at nature, of course, it's like this, at the beginning, primarily it was like this savage ecosystem, and those creatures that managed to stick around became, in some sense, torchbearers of a potential sophistication of a genetical program. It's as if many lotteries have been won, even before the concept of a lottery was made. There has been a sort of, the best word actually, natural selection involved in nature. Now, something odd to me is that natural selection, it began being interfered with by subjective ultimate narratives on reality. It's as if the moment human beings began to speak, it's as if nobody ever asks, it's as if were there any prophets before language? Nobody asks that, but after language was a possibility, suddenly divine intervention, divine influence arose. It's not that it's not true. You see, some events are so far in the past that nobody can really know, and we're all hoping we're correctly shooting in the dark. That's really probably how every religious person feels, honestly. Every ideological system has its, how would I tell you this, has its value to the past, to the present, and to the future. It's like thinking of sky cities, and you wonder about its value to the past. Its value to the past is that it is the completion of the impossible. The value of that idea to the present, it is in some sense the action that is required to be taken towards it. And when it comes to the future beautifully is a word that captures the destination of destiny. It's so remarkable that these creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere evolved to become a subject to themselves, and now have subjectified the whole realm and are trying to, as accurately as possible, relate our inner realm, our subjective life, with our objective life. And the subjective life has a fluidity that the objective life doesn't have. What that means is, in front of my eyes, I'm just some guy sitting, giving a talk on his balcony. But in my inner realms, I can be the space where I am giving this talk. I can imagine myself being like Superman in the sky. I could imagine in the future, podcasters are just going to have their whole phone and this advanced technology, which is going to be a sphere, is just going to follow them wherever they go. And at the same time, there's going to be some sort of anti-gravity wear, or some sort of float in the sky properly technology, And so I could totally see future podcasters just flying in the sky, recording, just imagine you're flying and you're watching the whole city and society, and you're giving recording a podcast at the same time. When flight technology actually becomes legit on the planet, there's going to be witnesses to everything. there's going to be heroes from the sky emerging. We're going to go to that time, you know. Really, if flight technology becomes like culturally accessible in the future, pretty much you're going to live as if like we're going to have the consciousness of eagles, you know. But anyways, I over fascinated myself with that. With flight technology, but pretty much I'm trying to tell you the present, past, present, future classifications and filters for meaning and value of something. When I look at human nature, pretty much this is the idea I'm building towards, where you look at nature and it's just been the environment. There hasn't been any unnatural or supernatural event, right? Until the human being became the human being, and then there was a sort of self for the processing to begin, right? So the brain's behavior began when a sort of subjective self was sculpted in the void. Now, to me, this is what's fascinating, that sometimes I look at religions, and when I say religions, guys, I'm talking about the, you know, major players, right? But usually the Abrahamic religions, because the Abrahamic religions seem to fascinate our species, you know, in ways where there's billions of religious people on the planet, and, you know, for someone who wants to build an advanced civilization, the ideology of the peoples in the realms doesn't matter, their actions matter, you know. To me, when I think about if religion didn't exist, imagine there was a parallel universe where there were no religions, it's as if it would be a sort of natural flow. There would be no divine intervention, there would be no sort of revelation from an inconceivable source, do you know? It would just have been creatures. It's as if like man's mind would have still dwelled in man's mind, but and from the moment when the concept of God, like it's like ancient cultures have had the concept of God, but they haven't had it proper, like how would I say it, like universally. What I'm trying to, okay, let me rephrase what I just said. I'm trying to say, like, sure, the ancient Egyptians worshipped the sun as God. Like, sure, the concept of God can go very ancient. But to me, it seems like there was a message in a bottle given to, let's say, the Abrahamic prophets, or pretty much any significant human being that has had a major influence on people's attention around the 6th century. What I'm trying to say is that if religion wasn't here, that space of attention would have been utilized for something different. Now, there is no saying that it's like inevitably human beings would suddenly feel like their mind is like the divine speaking to them, but what I'm trying to say is that imagine a human being lives 100 years of life, and from the beginning of their life, they just have a religious filter on reality. And so it's as if how many ideas and inner worlds have gone missed. Do you know, it's the story of human psychology is hilarious. Either either something's possessing it, or it's possessing something. You know, either the causal position of the realm originates where man is originating, or it doesn't. What I'm trying to say is that religion all major religions, they have been very unique and strange events that have happened that make a person wonder, if they hadn't happened, what kind of world there would have been, and now that they have happened, what kind of world it would lead. Imagine being a religious futurist and then somebody's like, why are all the religious futurists gloomy? And then they realize it's because the end of days is like the edge of the last chapter of manifestation, like the concept of apocalypse. But I would tell you, the only thing that makes sense, and this is very incredibly bold and silly way of saying it, but it's like, to me, the religions, I am getting more and more clues that they are actually communications from the future, because why else would man's conduct be important? Do you know? Like, do you know what I'm saying? So imagine in one timeline of Earth, people are just growing, just everything's going about naturally, and then so there is no suddenly like divine intervention. Now in the parallel reality where things are going normally and then there is divine intervention, it's another way of saying man's intelligence wasn't enough. You see, it wasn't enough that human intelligence was being sourced. It's as if the attention of the human being has not just gone to the visible world, but it has gone to the invisible world. And this is such a important factor, because something the modern generations and I would say the modern generations are forgetting how multidimensionally our ancestors lived in their inner realms. Like, they had relationships with deities, do you know? Pretty much the idea of transcendence can be attributed to religion. That means maybe religion was the first time human beings had some source of information to establish a worldly relationship with the unseen, right? Like, it's very obvious that our ancestors, before they spoke language, they were like, the conditions of the world would apply. And it's another way of saying that darkness, light, literally an on and off, like switch effect. Like, imagine you're in a room and it's like the light is on, off, on, off, on, off. And so the psychology, like the evolutionary intelligence, like I'm trying to say, even our blinking mimics, the absence and presence of light. It's as if, why were the demonic archetypes attributed to darkness, and why were the angelic archetypes attributed to light? Why is truth, for example, in religious ideology, attributed to light? Because it's as if it's the nature of light is revelation. Revelation is not just a book, it's every moment where a known self finds itself in an unknown world. Anyways, again, I'll keep trying to paint this picture I want to share from my inner realms. Pretty much, to me, it was like divine intervention, like the fact that prophets heard, let's say, the voices of angels, or revelation came somehow, To me, that is like another timeline's intent. That's like another dimension's business. Do you know? And if you think about the purpose of religion is to do exactly as the religious book says, it's literally like, imagine a time traveler didn't have time to like, tell the, imagine, okay, let's say there's a time traveler from the future, he comes to the past, but he has a business meeting in the future, so he can only be in the past for like a few minutes. Right? And this time traveler, let's say, has a book from beforehand, and instead of like talking to someone like a time traveler appearing out of nowhere, the time traveler, let's say through some sort of futuristic invisible technology, stealth technology, just gives a book, do you know? And that book is like another way of saying a time traveler interfered in that point in history. Right? Like, we can make this argument that there's multiple histories going on. Do you know? It's very hard to say what, in an infinite context, really where the edge of reality is. So, or even think of it this way, another way I can connect to this idea is, for example, the New Age community believes in angels. Right, like the concept of guardian angels. Ancient traditions, even the Sufi tradition, believed in this concept of angels. It's as if, how would the guardian angel have the ability to guard? And people would say it's God's will, like from the theological lens. But I would say the only way an intelligence knows how to guide is if it has made the journey already. To me, the concept of guardian angels was replaced with future selves. You know? The moment we create past selves, future selves exist. You know how many people are like, yo man, I remembered my past life, I was a badass king, and then there's some people who are like, man, you remembered your past life, I am living my future life right now. Do you know? To me, the guardian angel is the future self that knows what mistakes shouldn't be taken. To me, the purpose of life is to enter the future, and the perfect purpose of justice is how it enters the future. You see, the cool thing about life is there has never been winners or losers. It's as if trying to say the drops in a river, which drop is winning the race. Like, it's as if it's like nature is a force ultimately. And when humanity has a sort of cosmic humility where our species realizes, no way, we've been naming everything this whole time. It's like like, honestly, our species is so bold. We are the boldest species, Like, I'm pretty sure extraterrestrials are looking, like, from the sky. Like, imagine in a parallel universe of Earth, extraterrestrials are looking from the sky at human beings, and then they're like, yo, these human beings don't know shit. But they are claiming that they know everything. Like, how bold would you have to be for that? Anyways, I'll continue still trying to paint this, abstract idea. Pretty much, I'm saying that religions are from the future. I'm that guy who is considering that prophets actually had access to like time traveling privileges, There's a prophet called Yunus, or I think it's Jonah, I don't know the exact name, but this prophet would get dreams of what would happen like the next day or next week or something. To me, those human beings that cared for the future got to see a new version of it, right? And to me, we're living in a world where religions are like these giant trees from back in the day that haven't been cut and don't need to be cut at the same time. And then, how would I say it? It's like I'm reminded by, of that scene in the movie, like the old movie of Christ, where Christ is on the cross and says to God, like, forgive them for they do not know, something like in those lines. To me, it seems that that's again a time traveler symptom. Do you know? It's like the time traveler's ego has a sort of divinity because it is incorporating the future as a factor. Do you know how many people call themselves spiritual, but they actually are afraid of time? That's the bizarre thing. People are afraid of time, so they have to go into a singularity or the void. It's as if human beings are escaping their future by destroying the concept of time in the present, and this is an error. Do you know the future is like really the only thing to live for? Do you know, like a person can love nature, but then you see even nature's like, buddy, I'm changing with the world. It's like we can't stop change. We can consciously ride the waves of the collective unconscious. We can consciously pilot through the massive presence of how nobody knows how everything is knowing itself. Reality, the moment you're an individual, you have access to infinity, duality, oneness, and emptiness. And when I say you're an individual, like, really what it is like you can test an object by touching it to see if it's real, if it's present in the conscious waking state, but a subject cannot be touched. And what religions are on some angle culturally, we can't ignore how they are a sort of ideal worship, right? But it's at least an idea that is pointing to the inconceivable, right? It's as if religious texts really, they should be treated as books that are from an ideological position pointing man towards experiential position, right? People don't realize this, but religious books are sacred because of the claims they make. Do you see? Because of the vastness of the consideration of a sort of story to fit everything. Like, that's a challenge. If somebody was like told 8 billion human beings, create a story to the world. It's as if, let's say many people can think of a story like to the world, like a completely different mythological, different ethos of a universe. Like you can fathom it, but at the same time, what I'm trying to say is that just like a person looks at themselves in the mirror and that's what existence has brought forth, similarly, religion has been a natural intervention, right? Because it was prior to technology. I mean, think of, this is hard to say because language can be seen as a technology, right? It's as if divinity spoke. How bizarre is that? The divine intervention was through speech. And then there was like, that's its own universe. That's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is how that speech was received. To me, I think it's healthy to actually treat the world as if it's a story, right? And when I say it's a story, because there is ability in dictating the story. Every conversation I've had with people, and I've noticed their inner realms, I'm like, okay, this is this kind of universe happening here, you know. But again, I'll continue. One can have this angle of looking at this idea of religion being from the future in the sense that it's a message. So that means, like, okay, let's say God had a reason to give a message to man, and the other thing that it has a purpose, like has a reason to give a message to man, is our future, right? Like, we as a species could have a very incomplete and misguided view on the space-time continuum. And what is actually happening, it's as if the universe constitutes simultaneity. It's as if 50% of reality is matter and 50% of it is consciousness. But consciousness is like living space. I don't know how to say it. It's like, imagine, that guy from Frankenstein. Right now, imagine, like, a designer of an advanced civilization being like, space is alive. It's like, people of the world, space is alive this whole time. And what is life but just intelligence viewing? Imagine somebody sends you a text message, and the text message says, like, meet me, at this park, right? And then the person, okay, or let's say it's like, meet me at a gaming cafe, okay? Now imagine, instead of the person going to the address of the gaming cafe, right? They just worship the text message, and they think the text message is the truth of reality, but a message is just, an intent carrier. Something beyond human had to interfere with the human in the history of this, let's say, parallel universe event. We can't ignore the idea of the soul. We can't ignore the idea of God. We can't ignore the idea of mind. And we cannot ignore the actual presence of the body. Do you know? It's as if there's so many things we can't ignore that at some point the seeker of truth is like, there's too many truths. How long am I seeking? To me, I think about an advanced human being. They have lived their past life. They have lived their present life. And the only life that remains is their future life. We can even say prophets were the first human beings that cared for the future, actually. For the future of everything. I have had the privilege, because I was born in Iran, I got to see that culture, and I was fascinated by the position religion, the part religion plays in the life of people. For some people, without religion, the world is like empty, right? And for some people, with religion, the world is empty. That means if any abstraction is held as true, the only great thing about religion is that it points to the inconceivable. Everything else is just, the message being confused with the messenger, or the source. There is a energetic source to this life, and when I look at the human being, it's automatically, I have this view on nature where I'm like, oh man, this is so silly. It's like creatures on a rock in somewhere where we can't see the edge of, it's like, believe it or not, I don't want to say this, but maybe the future generations who yearn for sky cities will feel like we have been trapped on a spherical island for too long. Technology is our way out of, I would say, savageness. People don't realize technology infused with what I would term as hyper-ethics. A great future is like awaiting us, you know. For me, I feel I can see it. It's as if I'm glimpsing something beyond this current period of, you know. It's as if sometimes I feel my mind is actually timeless, because the mind creates the concept of time, which means the ultimate way you as, like the way you as a human being consider your original awareness. That is like being you, right? Now, when it comes to the mind has an ability that the body doesn't have, and the mind can reposition itself based on any context it considers. Like if somebody was, you know, talking about the mind like a wild animal, this wild animal bites anytime it feels it will get more than it loses. Like that is the, I don't want to say curse, but that is like the conditioning of the human entity, right? It's as if duality has convinced us that there's nothing else, and we don't realize that the mind is dancing as worlds in front of us. The future to me is like really what it's like another word for divinity, right? It's as if miracles happened and that person's ancestors survived just for what, right? Like it's as if they survived for the continuity of some value, right? To me, it's as if like they should create this religion called honestyism or honestism, you know, and it would surpass all religions. Why? Because if you're honest, you realize there is more unknown variables than known. So you don't become a chained, bewildered beast, an ideologically chained, bewildered beast, when you actually acknowledge it's okay to look at life and realize the species doesn't know. And I am telling you, the mystery of human intelligence is so beyond any story we've said so far, where it's as if every day I'm trying to see, you know, where the edge of, you know, one corner of the universe can go. I have made this argument in previous episodes, where I have said that there is a huge potential that the future is a collective being. That means if in the future we all, our consciousnesses become like at the level of the world, it's as if it's like future, God is our future self. If there is an evolution of the fascination of an entity towards the inconceivable. You see, it's as if we are evolving beyond time, and then there's going to be a sort of emotional kind of feeling where what did the species do when, you know, when it was here? Like that's going to be a guilt, not a guilt, but just like this eerie feeling that the species has not implemented its greatest strategy when it has many. Right? It's as if like knowledge is surviving in the unknown. It's not an animal in a world when it comes to the inner witness. To me, this concept of the inner witness through Vedanta, I realized it, but really what it means is that in complete silence and stillness, one realizes that the end has no meaning. And really what life is infinite beginnings. The brain has danced in that way. We are not a species in time. We are a species that simulates time in every moment, which is another way of saying a person in a blink of an eye can see a completely different world. Right now, my strategy, Mr. Within strategy, is to try to get the species to not only acknowledge it has imagination, but to wonder about its greatest use. Right, to me, like, the fascination of the world is really like there's something happening here, and regardless of like what culture says, it's as if it like there's a living mystery. We're living in a mystery. That means instantly when there's so much more left to explore, the certainty of the past is hollow. The evolution towards the inconceivable doesn't need to be a storyline trapped in time, right? Can you imagine, like, let's say 3,000 years from now, and there's like androids, and these androids are all praying like in a temple, you know, in a Zen temple, imagine. That means an ideological system can echo. And many ideological systems echo, mainly like an idea becomes eternal when it solves a universal problem. You know, you can say the species needs to build an advanced civilization, or you would say consciousness needs to move towards the eternal remembrance of its future. The future has a strength that the past will never understand. And if those who are present do not realize that we need to start treating as if, imagine like the moment you open your eyes, what the world is a massive information wave. And then when this information wave hits you, when you contact an existential world, all this information has to be pointed, because the nature of the human being is that regardless of how much it says oneness, it's going to realize that there's way more than a concept here. What's going on Earth is beyond conception. That's what's up, And when I say it's beyond conception, time is conceived. That means a timeless future can adjust any moment in time. I would say in mystical thought, they have this view that there's a veil, and I would say mystics have seen the sensory perception, the generator of samsara being like the senses being a veil, but I would tell you, for the mind, time is the veil. Beyond time, meaning stops, and experience is instantly, like intelligence is instantaneous, happens on an instantaneous way. Imagine a time traveler from a cruel future just goes back in time and gives a message and says, hey guys, just love each other, or like the future's gonna be fucked up, right? Like, that's totally plausible. Like, religion is it's time travelers in disguise, maybe. And what time travel is the potential of the present actualizing in the present, which is another way of saying when you experience something that just by the nature of the inner event, the feeling of its time is there, The past is 1/3 of life. The present is 1/3 of life, and the future is 1/3 of life. But people are under this impression that only the past and present is where conduct has to occur. Right? It's another way of saying in 2022 people care for their grandkids, their great-grandkids, and let's say their great-great-grandkids, and then after that they don't care. You know, nobody cares for their great grandkids to the power of infinity. To me, God would be an ingenious strategy of a time travel. It's like so smart, right? That it's as if you keep the unknown alive, you instruct the behavior of savageness, and it's as if, like, I would tell you, Buddhism has a very good view on Dharma, where it's as if like truthful, mindful engagement is as if like a person's conduct and behavior is like the raft that takes them, you know, to the heavenly abode. In Buddhist thought, you see, it's as if, I would say, religious people are people who just, like, they have prioritized behavior over exploration of reality. In some of the other talks, I've also mentioned this idea that we are right now being our future self's memory. So let's say if a person feels sad, your future self has to deal with a sad memory of yourself. Let's say if the person feels they are like, you know, they have found a sort of supreme state of being where the unconditional dictates the conditional. It's as if the memory you leave for your future self is pure energy. You know, that means, you know, it's like the silence of the mind is the return to an energetic experiential language of how perception is being, right? It's as if, is the inner self moving the outer self? Is the outer self moving the inner self? Is the inner world moving the inner self? Do you know? Or is the outer world moving the outer self, right? These are all, like, really what it is geometry is going to be the finale of language. The greatest discovery in academia would be a way of interconnecting every known human ideology to the geometry of the human biological body. Children in the future should be able to look at the palm of their hand and not know every single anatomical knowledge about the body, but in some sense they could, it's as if the meaning of life, like, instead of having the alphabet, the future language would be based on the body, you know, the biological body. That's honestly the best backup system to a, you know, dystopic technological future. In the image of nature, we build an artificial future because, like, you know, the civilization 1.0 is moving that way. Like, what can I say? Right? Nature, it's as if on some level, if the person does not balance the past, present, and future in any angle, there's a sort of extremist consequence. That means if you don't care about the past, then it's as if, like, it's like there's more energy going into generating relationships between the present and the future. If you don't care about the future, relationships between the present and the past. If you don't care about the past and future, it's another way of saying you are de-evolving. We evolved to be able to fathom a future, and it's another way of saying where the future exists in our minds and in front of our eyes, we're just trying to get there. You see, the future has to exist if the present wants to go anywhere. I think soon the species will realize that the fixed story of a self in a world is actually a multidimensional self in a multidimensional world, which means fear is going to become extinct. The concept of fear is not going to exist in the future. Reality is too multidimensionally accessible for that. It's as if life and death are going to mean something completely different in the future. In the future, there is just, let's say, energy eterna, It's just force. That's really what life is, even a person's style and mannerism, it's just the expression of force, all those people in history who are like, I'm suffering, they didn't realize life is a force, Our attention is a world generator, a world keeper, and a world destroyer. If a human being doesn't care for their future, it's going to become easy to hate the past. But for the sake of the future, the smart forgive. It's as if 8 billion human beings need to begin running at, what it is? This is a prediction I'm going to make. There's going to be a cultural global explosion. And when I say explosion, I'm talking about it as a philosopher in regards to the conceptual position of every person's mind. What I mean by that is that it's like right now we're living at a time where the great game of life has not been activated. Has not been, it's like the game's not, it's very hard to say. Like, I think these Mr.Within talks may go down in history as, one of the earliest attempts of a human being to care about civilization 2.0. It's as if solving the problems on an individual level is not, challenging, and then the person wonders about collective problems. I actually, before this episode, there's something from, let me see. There's this website called the World Health Organization. And they share, statistics. It says, I'll just read this. It says mental health conditions are increasing worldwide, mainly because of demographic changes. There has been a 13% rise in mental health conditions and substance use disorders in the last decade to 2017. Mental health conditions now cause 1 in 5 years lived with disability. Around 20% of the world's children and adolescents have a mental health condition. Okay. With suicide the second leading cause of death among 15 to 29-year-olds, approximately 1 in 5 people in post-conflict settings have a mental health condition. Mental health conditions can have a substantial effect on all areas of life, such as school or work performance, relationships with family and friends, and ability to participate in the community. Two of the most common mental health conditions, depression and anxiety, cost the global economy, US, $1 trillion each year. Despite these figures, the global median of government health expenditure that goes to mental health is less than 2%. Okay, the World Health Organization has, reminded, the species. I would say this, that really, it's another way of saying that beyond physical survival, physiological survival, there is psychological survival, and how that psychological survival needs to be managed is really through pretty much the pilot of the plane of existence realizes where it is. To me, nothing can advance the human being more than an instantaneous freedom. To me, that's the beauty of mysticism, you know. Rumi, the poet Rumi from 700 years ago, he says, why crawl through life when you were born with wings? The past had to trust the future, and we have to trust the future. And if the species does not establish a relationship, the idea of an advanced civilization is the fastest thing that will give purpose to every human being on the planet. But it gives the purpose of the potential of the species. You see, we're in the era of advanced communication. That means beyond just through the acknowledgement of the concept of the inner realms and outer realms, there's a great liberation in culture awaiting, right? It's as if a person can suddenly discern what is the inner realms, what is the outer realms, and how a subject and object can be linked, right? And if you're of a philosophical class of mind, you know, the world was never small, and truth is how the conceivable notices the inconceivable. Freedom is unconditional. I think that the idea of a future self interfering with the past self, it's another way of saying that regardless of what happens, 8 billion human beings require to pilot themselves through a natural resonance. And pretty much it's as if we've reached that point in history where the mind of the human being is going to roar like a lion. It's going to roar. Displays of greatness. Do you know what that means? That means that not only the planet no longer has the concept of depression, but it has set forth its attention on the birthright of the intelligence to even fathom a possibility of something else. You know, imagine this person prayed to God and somebody said God is within, and then the person's like, if God is within, why do I need to pray? And so the person began, speaking to the unknown eyes within, just to realize that the absence in trust in nature leads to dehumanized timelines for the human being, for the species. I think it's very possible that in the future we have advanced beyond time, and there's a sense of just like how natural it is for us to be individual beings. In the future, it's going to be that natural to be a collective being. And a collective being is free from individual restriction. That means there's the universal human rights, Declaration of Human Rights, which is for the body of, it's considering the biological position of the human being. And then there is the consideration of the psychological position of the human being and the ethics of the most advanced possibility. Pretty much this is my, you can say, Mr. Within strategy to build civilization 2.0, where I'm trying to awaken a fascination for the future that is the birthright of all those who are alive now, which are coincidentally pioneers of the future if they care for the future. Sometimes I, have felt that I've had a time traveler's ego. And that's another way of saying somebody who cares for the future more than the past or the present. But at the same time, I have realized that none of it matters when there's infinity involved in the life process. There's infinite dimensions. There is countless stars. The world is so big that the human affair, its divinity, will seem small, but really it's just the mystery of intelligence. We're living at the coolest phase in history where we have technology, we have language, we have so many, we have such an evolutionary advantage, and we haven't discovered our true nature yet. In the future, children may be born already knowing their true nature, and they have missed out on the journey. Do you know? Imagine somebody believes in a religion called Newism, okay, Newism, all right? And in Newism, pretty much every argument is like, hey man, the newest thing is the realest thing, you know? It's as if the responsibility of morality is given to other, let's say guardians of the species. Really, the problems of the world seem challenging because we don't know what it would look like if 8 billion human beings started to build the greatest science project ever. Every person being born having at the background, at the back of their mind, right beside their conscience, the honor for an advanced reality. And when I say advanced, this is in all dimensions. That means the greatest advancement is advancement in all fathomable dimensions of being. It's another way of saying that the battle between chaos and order stopped because a third party came and told the chaotic and ordered dimensions of the universe to work together. And when they work together, they build a massive, how can I tell you, it's as if it's like at the end of the day of days, it's all just beings here, right? Everything else is geometry. All our judgments, like on reality, are just judgments about geometry and color. Like all the isms, like for example, racism, it's a judgment on color and geometry. Like it's so bizarre, right? It's as if so people don't care what their hair color is like, but they care what the skin color is like. That's like the dumbest thing, It's so what I'm trying to tell you is that the obsession with geometry and color and space having to specifically mean something, like the mystery of the realm can't be hidden. We have reached the time where explorers beyond language are required. Advancement in the conceptual domains. Like I'm telling you, just like a chess game with a few chess moves, the educational system can become the greatest educational system ever. But because it is worshipping the past, it's as if like the future misses out. The present misses out on the future. Sometimes you gotta think about this world and realize there is truth. The species is depressed because it doesn't know what its ability is. I am telling you, it's as if when you're alive once, when the airplane is in mid-air, the pilot should befriend its, chair. It's another way of saying, like, the greatest way to honor the future is to allow it. Sometimes I really think about what's going to happen in this life. And it's as if, for how long can awareness be present in an unknown way to itself? It's after some point, conception is like a dream that was never there. You know what I mean? Like, it's as if the mystery of intelligence returns. We're not in the main room. It's like we are in like the office next door to the main room. That's like where Earth is. It's like this dimension is really just it's a great workplace, but also a great stage of discovery, right? Like the Earth is a place where sophisticated creatures in massive numbers can generate efficient systems that make inefficiency never makes like it's as if inefficient. It's how do I say it? It's as if, like, when the species sees how unnecessary violence is, and how violence is an attitude, and how all that energy going to violence can be used in the inner realms for innovation and advancement of the civilization. It's as if, like, violence stopped on Earth. We didn't say we have world peace, but violence stopped, and it's as if the reason it stopped was because human beings realized the ability the mind provides. It's as if you suddenly see a beautiful dimension to the civilized humanity, right? There's something that separates us from the savageness of our ancestry and the viciousness of animals, right? That is a subjective layer, and it's an honor for world. When the honor for your world goes away, then it becomes easy to be cruel, right? It's really just an outlook. People have to realize that their attention is the greatest truth that they know by being. Attention is like, study how your mind is happening, because nobody on the planet has your DNA. Like, that's the advantage of the human species. It's as if, what do we do with, like, colossal problems in the future of, this reality, this Earth? And the answer is that we just increase the ability of the species, the potential, right? That means that the future generations, all they need to have is hope, and it's as if such great backup systems have been provided. There was this character in this show that said one of the deepest sentences I'd heard in my life, right? It's this show, Shingeki no Kyojin, and the character who says this line is Commander Aaron Smith in the show, in like the studio. And somebody tells him, is this all meaningless? Like a soldier that's freaking out, and he looks at it, and he looks at the soldier, this commander, and in the show, all the characters are gonna go, they're like, marching to their end, right? And so the commander looks at the soldier and says, I don't know the exact line, but he says, life isn't meaningless. Its meaning is that we live for those who will understand, for those who will know the meaning one day, right? We're living for the future that we'll get to see something that we knew we couldn't, but at least we helped the future start ahead. In the inner realms, it's literally a decision. That's how simple peace is. It's as if, like, inner peace is how, like, freedom is natural. And when you realize that freedom is natural, it's another way of saying that it's as if you're this free awareness, and then the body is within it, and then the choice comes, where where this goes. If you function as this awareness that is being your whole moment, you realize there is no personality to it. So you're actually becoming a very pure witness of the inner realms and outer realms at the same time. When I say go within, I don't mean just dwell in your inner realms. My greatest effort is really to just see what is the most advanced thing I can do. I'm a bit selfish in that way. It's like, again, the time traveler's ego. It's like the future deserves better. Can you imagine a time traveler comes to the present, and the person's like, what are you doing, future self? Why are you here? Right? And the future self just shouts at the past self, saying like the future deserves better and all that. Honestly, inner realms, every person is like you're the king of the kingdom behind your eyes. In front of your eyes, the king of the kingdom is actually the inconceivable source of it. Behind your eyes, attention animates worldhood instantly or simulates it. In front of your eyes, it's as if we're living in the imagination of a world we can't see its edge of yet. The future is just something incredible to study, right? I remember in one talk I was like, the educational system shouldn't allow people to graduate to the next level unless they plant a tree and at the same time they create something new that had never existed before. That means every person in university has to, in some sense, create a concept before they graduate. A concept that has never existed. It's another way of saying when you care for your world, you want to get to know it, and when you come to get to know this cosmic intelligence, you realize just how it's present. A person's presence is just the being of freedom, and a person's personality is how free they are. It's really like once you realize all the known variables and unknown variables, all the conditional and unconditional factors are just present in awareness. Awareness doesn't die, right? And it's as if the mind is how you can say like if the body was like an Iron Man suit, the mind is like a universe suit inside the Iron Man suit. It's just incredibly unique how 8 billion creatures can communicate and just staring at the unknown. Like, this is the most important moment in the history of the human race. How do we choose to see ourselves, and how do we choose to see our world? Because really, somebody, it's like, if you ask that, let's say based on these statistics from the World Health Organization, let's say you did a similar survey, and so it was maybe something like, you realize all those people who are depressed have given up on the future. It's as if mental health becomes important only when the future doesn't exist. People are just freaking out and they're like, why is this happening? It's because on some level we're stranded on this rock in this endless cosmic sea. We have to, just like survivors in the cosmos, use everything accessible to try to figure out, in some sense, we seek clarity like an eagle that has already flown from the branch into the sky. You see that the metaphor has such a profound value because it's freedom to see all dimensions at once rather than being occupied or possessed by one. Dear listeners, the smartest approach is to consider nobody knows anything. everybody is limited to their experiential access. So every person's DNA is like, even though we're 8 billion people on the same planet, but behind our eyes, it's not the same planet. Every person has their own value system imposed to the context of the whole. Right now, we have reached a time in history where genius cannot be shy, because what the future deserves, you know what it is? It's like we can make a great chess move as a species, and we can counter extinction, right? I've envisioned this as Civilization 2.0. I'm writing a book on it, but there's so much to say about it that I don't know how many books I will write on it, and will it be enough? But really, what I'm trying to say is that the mind may never be healthy in an unhealthy world. And the world has been kept the way it is because of the absence of novelty input. Right? Pretty much it's as if, is it more important to live like yesterday, or is it more important to live in a way that had never existed in the cosmos until then? Do you see? It's as if novelty is the future's wit. A species now has to establish a relationship with its future beyond the individual lens and beyond the collective lens. And really what's going to happen is that the era of true art history begins, because the truth is the creature really doesn't know what's going on. So it becomes a sort of global reset of the value system of mankind, no longer fearing the unknown, but loving the unknown, which means life is, the meaning of life is the activation of potential. That's really it. Like, why are the Buddhists preaching compassion so much? Why are they religion? Like, people don't focus on this, but a lot of religions talk about love. Like, they say some messed up stuff too, but like, they talk about love ultimately. And what is love? Love is like what you find when you have accepted the presence of reality. The mind is the closest thing to a time travel machine. A person goes about their day and they could just remember what they ate yesterday, like out of nowhere. Like, the memory comes about. So technically the brain is time traveling to itself. Like, it's even creating the concept of time. So ultimately the starting point is unknown. We have entered a phase of noble intelligence. And so this noble intelligence, first of all, the system's so big that it's not like one person can change it, but at the same time, one person can present a sort of pattern into the system. Rather than us having two sides to political systems in the future, it's just going to be like, how do we get the greatest ideas to work in for every single component? Political systems should be completely redesigned every time the world's changing. You know what I'm saying? Pretty much, I have this feeling that in the future, AI is going to replace politics. Like, robots are going to get the jobs of politicians, because like a robot can be programmed to lie. Do you know what I'm saying? But ultimately, let's say in an ethically, in a civilization where there's hyper-ethics, right? It's as if we just input the problems in the nation and the AI gives answers, and people vote on which answer for what problem, not on just like one person representing everything. The whole system can advance if it feels it deserves to. That's really the precondition to the perception of any world. It's like, if the world doesn't deserve to be there, some force will just, enter novelty unnecessarily. Enter emptiness unnecessarily. It's a giant question mark. We're living in a giant question mark. The question mark is the only thing you can say everything is a question mark. Anyways, guys, I hope this episode was helpful, and future selves are guardian angels. God is the collective future self being. Religious texts are it's very hard to say. It's as if like okay, here I'll say this: religions, the holy books, are transcendental messages in a bottle. They are messages from the future. The future is inconceivable. Everything makes sense now, and the species is going to build an advanced civilization. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings, and namaste. And I reset the membership. If people would like to support the channel, it would be great. Anyways, the last thing about a time traveler's ego. Who has the time for time? There's advancement beyond every horizon. Every concept has a superior inconceivable position. Rather than the human attention being occupied in a story of misery, it just needs to see 4.5 billion years has enlarged the canvas of perception. It's not like it's like, maybe sure that we can't see the edge of the world. There's a downside to that, but the upside to that is that there is so much space for novelty to bring forth worldhood. Like there's so much space for innovation that it feels like it's like the atmosphere of a paradise. A paradisal sphere. Paradisal sphere, guys. It's like the atmosphere of a sort of paradise advanced civilization. Plus, imagine there's a time traveler from the future. He comes back to the past, changes the past, goes back to the future, and he says, "I did it, guys." And then all the time travelers' friends in the future are like, "Yo, man, that's not cool, messing around with the past." It's like accept your own future instead of changing some other dimension's past. Reality is it's the search for the unconditional freedom. Plato says time is the moving image of eternity. On the other side of time, there is the grand event of reality is consciously